I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, you guys got the hardest pipeline in special operations in America. It's the hardest pipeline. It's a combination of EOD brains and like Navy SEAL punching the nuts every day.
A couple of guys were just coming off a jump mission into a bear mission. Like you said, the 2 hunters were out there. They both got mauled, and one got away. They went and got him. The other guy was the focus of the attack. Man, I that's one of my, I think that and great whites probably is one of my. Bear would be worse because they hold you down and eat you from the legs up. But the guy's head was gone, and he was propped up against a tree when they found the body. And just a really, I mean, the bear could be still around. Like for those guys to jump in that mission, that's crazy. And the Alaska guys are definitely, their op tempo is they're running hundreds of missions a year stateside, and they're maintaining their wartime presence as well. So those guys do a lot of work. So I'd say, all the teams have their...
All right, folks, we got a good one today. My man, Chris Clafton-Hager, is coming out of the PJs. We all have heard some of the stories about what PJs do, how they get there. They're all unbelievable. Parachuting into the middle of sailboats in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, saving crab fishermen from boats in the middle of the Bering Sea in the winter. The job is unique in every way. So, Chris, thank you for coming on, man. The allure of PJs is massive in the special operations community. Even when I was in the teams in the late 90s, the stories of you cracking a guy's chest, barroom floor with a beer bottle. Cats just had such reverence for the PJs because we all know you guys are the best field surgeons in the world, keeping guys alive a little bit longer so that you get them to the aid station or to the MASH unit and get them fixed up, man. I just want to say thank you for coming on. Thank you for your service. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me, Jake. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the accolades. Mutual respect to everybody we're all cogs in the wheel. We all play our part in that and in the big mission. So the Pararescue, and also previously I was in the Navy. I served with Recon Marines as a corpsman before switching over to PJ. So got kind of the poo-poo platter of service, and got to work with some really great people, stand on the shoulders of giants, and work shoulder to shoulder with heroes. So I was really blessed.
Man, Chris, you done just opened a can of worms, brother. I didn't realize. So one of my big pushes for young men that want to be SEALs, special operators, is I feel like the Marine Corps, in every SEAL team, there's normally 1 to 2 Marines. And the Marines that come to training are just mature on a different level, understand suck. They do well in our pipeline. I know they do well in the Army pipeline. So in all the special forces in the Army, I always am a big proponent of young men going to the Marine Corps for 4 years. It's one of my closed pipelines, right? Like I got construction pipeline, send them to construction for a couple of years, or send them in the Marine Corps for 4 years. Did that prep you fully for going over to the PJ world? I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, you guys got the hardest pipeline in special operations in America. It's the hardest pipeline. It's a combination of EOD brains and like Navy SEAL punching the nuts every day. Time in the Marine Corps prepare you well to go over there.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it just on a maturity level, we got to the war in Iraq kicked off. So I did 2 tours in Iraq before I crossed over to the Air Force, and the Marines are good at doing more with less, even though, of late, I think they've kind of caught up on the gear side. They still are minimalist. Their basic skills are still intact. They shoot with iron sights, first, and they develop up to the optics and everything. I think that attitude really just kind of gives you a grounding in maturity. They have an exquisite way to kind of introduce you to the suck all the time. It never relented when I was in there. There's a little bit more comfort in the Air Force, which was nice. At times, it definitely had its surges of suck, for the mission. In that way, I think it's a I don't want to say longevity, but the Pararescue and being attached to the air crew has a different culture. And, I think rest is good, and I think it gets you sharp for the mission. And we could kind of pick and choose as pararescuemen to get the crew rest thing and use it when it kind of helped us. And then other times we could step away from it. And if we were on a mission with the guys who didn't get to get those rests and stuff, but we walked that line pretty well. But yeah, I would say, short story, the pipeline and definitely my service with the Marines and the war and everything definitely gave me the reality check when I went back into a pipeline through Pararescue, that I was just prepared. I could step out and take care of the guys, even though it was chaos and, the chaos that ensues with any pipeline, at BUDS and the Army SF and Rangers, like they kind of get you to the same place. But I'd been there before, and I've been there many times, and I understood the process. So that really helped with my mindset and helped me bring other guys with me that I could. There were guys that fell off, but that's okay too.
Awesome, brother. Like it's so interesting because everybody comes from kind of the same chewed up background in special operations, and you get on the phone. Like I've never met you before. I know we talked on the phone a little bit, but it's just, the backgrounds all come from the same adversity, right? Like if you don't have no adversity in your background, you're not making it. It's so awesome about PJs. You guys have the ability to do your mission every day of the year, all around the country, all around the world, really. I mean, you guys have been jumped in. I know Spain and some other places where you guys were set up.
And one was I went up there for a med training course, kind of a meeting of the minds for medical for pararescue. They held kind of a forum for it. And while I was up there, I came up from California to represent and talk about rewrites for our med books and all that stuff. A couple of guys were just coming off a jump mission into a bear mission. Like you said, the 2 hunters were out there. They both got mauled, and one got away. They went and got him. The other guy was the focus of the attack. Man, I that's one of my, I think that and great whites probably is one of my. Bear would be worse because they hold you down and eat you from the legs up. But the guy's head was gone, and he was propped up against a tree when they found the body. And just a really, I mean, the bear could be still around. Like for those guys to jump in that mission, man, that's crazy. And the Alaska guys are definitely, their op tempo is they're running hundreds of missions a year stateside, and they're maintaining their wartime presence as well. So those guys do a lot of work. So I'd say, all the teams have their, like you said, the water jump missions, the civil missions are really, I really enjoyed those because logistically they're very difficult to put together. It's multi-platform. It's multi-method. The extract is hairy because we're jumping way out. I think the one that we did, the two that I did, both we jumped past 1,700 miles off the coast of Cabo. So that's way out there in the big water, and there's nothing out there except sea monsters. And your team, and then your patient, whatever scenario you're stepping into. And I did two. One was a sailboat called the Wind Child. It was 5 old guys, just salty old sailors, and they do this trip periodically. I think they were doing it yearly, and they kind of spaced it out over time. But they went down to a regatta, and I think it was in Costa Rica. They won that, and then they were sailing to Tahiti together on a 32-foot sailboat. And these guys were like seasoned. It was pretty neat to watch. Once we got into the mission, got the patient taken care of, and we got really bad weather, we ended up having to do a transfer, but I'll jump back in it. So we got called out, and on that we're on 24-hour alert, but the missions aren't like Alaska. They're doing hundreds of missions a year, civil missions, different type stuff, not all jump missions. But for us, they pop up. We do probably, anywhere from 5 to 10 a year of these offshore long range over water missions, parachute missions, helos too, and at the California team. And so we get the alert, and they call the list of guys. They start with guys that have, are qualified and haven't gotten a jump mission before. And then they start working, down the list. There are some guys at the team that have gotten 8, 10, 12 jump missions. It's just kind of like you're present and you're going kind of things. I got lucky on both these and got, selected. The first one was actually all of us. It was our first jump mission on the sailboat mission. And we had a lot, we learned a lot on that one, lost some gear, and we had heavy seas.
So Chris, real quick, you obviously you're pre-stage. What's your recall time? I know you're on 24-hour recall, but like, what is your, how long is it? When are you expected to be in the building?
Closer's better. I mean, we don't have a leash really, but guys live local. And usually when these drop, we can put 4 guys together. It's a 4-man jump team. They usually want an officer on there, a senior enlisted, and then probably the 2 guys that are, younger. In this case, I was an E5 on my first mission, and I had a junior officer and then a senior enlisted guy, but he never had a jump mission. Just luck of the draw kind of thing. And we jump on. We had about a 2-hour launch because we knew that based on the flight time of the C-130 to get out to the mission, it was going to take like 6 hours to get out there. So we knew dark was coming. So we wanted to, if we were going to get in today, we had to go quick. So we grabbed all our gear, threw it on a Coast Guard bird because the Air Force birds were down, and grabbed a jump master that was going to stay on the aircraft. He was the DO, Director of Operations, the second in charge under the commander officer. And he came out to jump master for us. And so we flew out, refueled in Cabo, and then shot out to the site. We're on site, and it's getting dark. We had a low ceiling, probably 800 feet. We're jumping double back square static line. we put out the boat, and the D-bags for the boat came back in the aircraft for some reason. And so we got kind of tangled up. There was a delay coming off the ramp. So we ended up really spread out. Plus, we were dropping to 800 feet. It takes about 200 feet for that chute to open at that point with that configuration. So we're coming in hot. I didn't have time to turn into the wind. So I did a downwind and skipped off the top of the waves. Sea state wasn't too bad, but I swam for like 40 minutes in the open ocean by myself towards every once in a while I'd get a crest of a wave and I could see the chem lights of the boat. So I was swimming for the boat, and I had one guy behind me. And at one point I was swimming with my arm out, side stroke, finning, and just trying not to think about the sea monsters out there. And I hit something with you don't hit anything out 1,500 miles out to in the middle of the ocean. You don't hit things, with your hand, with your lead hand. So there might have been I let out a scream. And I jumped back and I was like, kind of assessed it. And it was the parachute of the guy that was in front of me in the line. So luckily it wasn't a sea monster at that point. So I knew I was going the right way, at least at that point. So kept swimming, got to the boat. The two guys had already gotten inflated. They were trying to start the engine. One of the guys was seasick already, and he was throwing up over the side of the boat. About 10 minutes after.
Who was it, Chris?
We'll keep the names out to protect the innocent or the guilty.
No, not the name, but it was the officer, was it not?
No, it wasn't actually.
Okay.
It wasn't. He had some guys, it's not when, it's not if you get seasick, it's when. I found out on this mission because I was like kind of giving him shit, and it was a reasonably heavy sea state, swells at that point. There was a storm coming that we experienced in the sailboat that night. And while we're trying to treat this patient, and we ended up all throwing up over the side of the boat and then going in and treating the patient, coming out, throwing up. But we get the engine going. We ride the Zodiac over to the sailboat, and the Coast Guard bird, while we were doing all that, the jump master had kicked off all of our supply boxes to us because they were running out of fuel. The Coast Guard bird didn't have an auxiliary fuel tank, so they couldn't loiter. And that was one of the things that when we got on scene, they were like, we got to go quick because we have to have enough fuel to get back. And actually the guy that was on there, he put all of his water gear on and was ready to bail out because they were running on fumes, but they made it. They ended up making it, but it was a little pucker factor for them too that we found out after the mission. So it was pretty high winds. So like the edge of our parachute limits as far as jumping in. So those boxes didn't have releases on them. So they took off, kept going. The sailboat caught one of them, but it was the oxygen. So it was pretty useless. So all we had was what was on us that we jumped in. So I had a med bag on me. We had everybody jumps in a little bit of stuff, we spread load, get on the sailboat. And I'd always wanted to, ever since I saw the Perfect Storm, there's PJs in that storm from the New York team. Those guys, when they got on scene, it was chaos.
Yep.
And we lost guys out there on that one. So, shout out to those guys. I mean, they're doing the mission too. That the Atlantic is no joke. It's cold and it's dark and it's big when there's storms and stuff. So, but when he got on scene with this person having the worst day of their lives, and he says, introduces himself. He says, "I'm going to be your PJ today." So, just calm as ever. And I think that really stuck with me. So when I entered the sailboat, despite the chaos, it's night, there's winds and waves, and we come out of nowhere. And I said, my name's Chris. I'm going to be your PJ today. And I went to treating him. A little bit cocky because about 20 minutes in is when I started throwing up because it was a bad sea state on a small sailboat and it's rocking. But I got an IV. We got some meds on board, got the guy comfortable. They'd been sailing and they caught a wave from the side, and the boom, he was sitting up with his head against the boat, and the boom came and smacked him right in the face on an inadvertent tack. They didn't see it coming. He bit his tongue almost off. It split his head from like the base of his skull to the top of his skull. We found out later he had a 4 centimeter depressed skull fracture, and he was in a bad way. He doesn't remember any of it. Like from the point of very few things, spotty throughout. We got him on meds. We kept him comfortable the rest of the time. So, I mean, serious enough. That guy probably would have died from infection. They were far enough out to where, he would have just circled the drain and passed. So we got on scene, got in the boat, treated him. And then we started sailing upwind to meet, or we're crosswinding to meet this container ship because we had no extract. We're too far out for the helicopters to come out and get us. So they started zigzagging. So we're zigzagging upwind, which is pretty brutal as far as sailing. It's not comfortable sailing. We're rocking. It's dark. It's raining. Wind's blowing. We're throwing up over the side. And me and my buddy, Sean, we take turns going down. We could watch the IV bag because we taped it so we could look in and be like, all right, we need to change it out, or it's time to go give him some meds. One of us would run down there, do it real quick, and then come over and puke off the side again. If he didn't get it done, we'd tag and I'd go back in and I'd do what I could, come back out and puke. So we did that all night for him. And the other guys were sick. They were doing their gig. And we got to the morning and the container ship, we spent about probably 13, 14 hours on that sailboat. And then the container ship, 300-foot container ship, a Maersk container ship from, I think it was Monrovia. So Monrovian crew and with Filipino deckhands. So it was interesting mix, interesting communication from that point. And the funny thing was whenever they had recovered the box that had our oxygen in it, they pulled it in. We ended up dumping it because we're like, we don't need the oxygen. We can't use it. So, but they'd sucked a rope into their prop. So now we're just sailing. We don't have a prop. We couldn't clear it. We tried to cut the rope away. One of the guys, Sean, went underneath and tried to use a knife, but it wound all the way up in the shaft. So there's no clearing it. And those guys had to sail to catch. They threw a 6-man life raft off the back of this 300-foot container ship on a mooring line. And it's dragging behind them. They're trolling forward at like five knots. And we're sailing, trying to catch this fucking thing back and forth and back and forth. So finally I jumped up on the front of the boat with a gaff and we sailed by it. I grabbed it and I walked it around the back of the boat, jumped in it, cut they had the little teepee in this little life raft. I cut that away and we brought all the guys over there and they pulled us to the 300-foot container ship with the patient on a stretcher. And then one of the guys climbed the rigging up to, and it's a sea state also at this point. So it's not going to be an easy transfer. They had like the wooden block and tackle pulleys. We had a guy go up. They set up like a pulley. We got the patient up into the boat and got him moving. And then we all got up and we cut that thing loose and waved happily to the sailboat. And those guys continued to Tahiti with 4 guys. They were still in their mission. So we got on the container ship and life got a little bit more stable. We got in the officer's mess and ate well. And they just took care of the patient for 2 days till we got into 600 miles off the coast is when the helos can come out and they'll in-flight refuel all the way out to the point. We hoisted him off of the flying bridge of the container ship, which was pretty cool. It was high. And then we had a 6-hour helo ride to Cabo to drop him off with the medical services there. And they took him. And what was cool is this is one of the few missions, because you think about missions and you go get people and then you drop them off somewhere. Usually it's to a military installation or a hospital or overseas, same thing. You never get to meet the patient's or the person's family. So when we got to Cabo, we actually went to the hospital, me and one of the other guys, to ride in the ambulance and then drop in there and do the transfer to the doctors and everything. And I wasn't prepared at all. So I walk in and I give the turnover to the docs. They take him away. And then one of the staff says, "Hey, the family's here. They want to talk to you guys." So my buddy bailed. And then I went and I was like, "I'll do it, whatever," and I walk in and it's his wife and his son. So, and they're crying, and I walk in and immediately I'm like, cool. The gravity of the situation kind of hit me because it's a mission. You go do your job, you get them, whatever, you hand them off. It's no big deal. But the gravity of these people drove from Washington State to Cabo to see their husband, their husband and their father that they thought they didn't know if he's going to live. The gravity of it kind of hit me right when I walked in the room. I could feel that emotion. And I'm tearing up, like trying to, just be humble. And it was one of the most humbling experiences I guess to date that I'd ever walked into, unbeknownst. So that was really cool to be able to see that. They correspond every once in a while back. And he returned to full duty. When he sailed again, doesn't really remember the whole thing. But I think the parts of it he did, we treated him with, a lot of respect, obviously, and mutual respect. We spent 3 days with a guy in that state, giving him meds and antibiotics and making sure that he's going to, make it to that next level of care. So that was it was a really good first one. And we learned a lot. We changed a lot of stuff out of that. Inevitably you learn, we lost some gear in the middle of the night on the sailboat. We tied the Zodiac to the back of the sailboat. So during the night with the waves, it cut through the line and that thing was gone. So we lost the Zodiac. We lost our monitor, our med gear, extra med gear. So when we got to the sailboat, we just had basic resuscitative capabilities. We didn't have any monitors, anything we could put on. We had to do like manual blood pressure cuffs. So all the basics come back into play. Sticks and rags, medicine came back into play. We really had to think through and write on paper and to remember everything, to kind of track the patient progress and all that stuff. So it was a big learning experience at the same time, real time, with a real patient. That's the stuff that really sticks. So we went back, made a lot of really good changes, released things on the parachutes so the boxes wouldn't just go to Cuba or the Galapagos in the Pacific. So yeah, that was a really good mission, really good one.
Chris, where was this at in your career? Like, where were you at? I know you said you're an E5. Was this at the beginning of your PJ career? Where was it at? I know you had a couple combat deployments with the Marine Corps, but like as a seasoned veteran, where were you at kind of in the hierarchy of PJs?
At that point, I was a team member, so I was the main medic. I mean, everybody, if you have a 4-man team, everybody's pitching in. It's not like anybody's not going to sit a rotation taking care of the patient, but the ultimate patient care was up to me. And then I had really good minds with me, like the senior enlisted guy. We bounced a lot of stuff off each other, and we didn't have any med books or anything with us. So we had to kind of be like, okay, how much can we give him, and how long can we go do this? And how do we titrate this to be able to last? And we were running low on fluids, so we had to steal from borrow permanently from the ship, and they had different fluids, right? So it's complicated. The whole thing logistically is really complicated and fun in that respect. It really pushes you to the edge of what you're way out of my comfort zone. But I was a kind of middle, we called him helo team leader at that point. I hadn't gotten my fixed wing and my jump master, and I wasn't a full up team leader to be able to lead a team, but I could lead a small team on a helicopter. So I'd done a couple of those missions. We did some searches in the Sierras and found some hikers, and I did the fires, the Northern California fires. We flew on that one. So some really cool stuff that I got to do also, just to kind of highlight the constant op tempo stateside of these pararescue teams and these guys. They're always doing the mission and looking for it and loving it. So yeah, for that one, I was a team member. So in my hierarchy, but I did two combat tours in Iraq. And then later I did the Horn of Africa with the PJs as a pararescueman, and then Afghanistan in 2010, which was a whole other, good experience too.
Yeah. I just think, Chris, like, I know from my background as a SEAL how, I don't want to say advanced, I'm going to say smart, right? Like, so we got some really smart guys in the SEAL teams. A lot of them end up being the 18 Deltas, right? Like the combat medics for us. But like, you basically are a doctor and you don't have an MD behind your name, but you're out there on a ship, a small sailboat, 35-foot sailboat, trying to save a guy's life and using every resource that you have. And I want to commend you, brother. Like, I don't think people understand, one, how much brain power it takes. Like, I got to go to work with Aaron down here in San Antonio, maybe 6 months ago, a year ago. You know what he was doing. He was down here with 4 PJs. They were working with the National Guard, doing some real awesome medic work. And I was just watching for a whole day, and I've been around some smart people. I went to the Naval Academy, I went to Michigan for my MBA, but watching them just regurgitate line after line of medical procedures, and okay, hey, we got a sucking chest wound, boom, and just running through the steps verbatim. When you're around people and there's 4 of them and they all have the same skill set, the same heavy brain, right? Like the ability to figure out what the problem is, the ability to address the problem, and then the ability to actually find a solution to the problem. It's just impressive, man. So I just want to commend you and say thank you, brother. Awesome, man. I so much reverence. I can't even put it into words.
I appreciate that, man. I have the same reverence, the same professionals that I get to serve with. And that's one of the things being a PJ and actually being a recon corpsman too. I got to serve with, great Marines in really horrible circumstances that do really wonderful things for each other, and even for indigenous people and even combatants. I've seen more grace than I've seen. I guess maybe I remember more grace than destruction, but I think that was always kind of the cool thing about my perspective in particular, is that I got to be a medic. So I got to view combat from that perspective. And then also as a PJ, I got to view combat from a rescue perspective. So we're always flying in or walking in or walking with, into these situations that, people are, regardless of whether they're combatants or these guys are having flying into a situation where they're having their worst day, guaranteed. And we kind of have to make calm out of chaos